Hello, good afternoon. I'm Michael Notkowski from the School of Computer and Cyber Sciences at Augusta University. Today I'm going to talk about some of the work we've been doing on medical device research. If you have any questions along the way, please ask your questions. A little bit about me. Again, I'm with the School of Computer and Cyber Sciences at Augusta University. Before I was with Augusta University, I was in the Army for 26 years. I was a Signal Corps officer, and when cyber became a branch, I switched over to cyber. And while I was on active duty, I taught up at West Point in the Department of Systems Engineering, and then later on at the Department of Electrical Engineering and Computer Science. So I enjoyed teaching. My last duty station was here at Fort Gordon. I had the opportunity to continue teaching here at Augusta University, and was fortunate enough that they hired me to do that. So I've been at Augusta University since 2016. I'm currently the Cyber Institute Director. I am also the lead on our Centers of Academic Excellence designations and our cyber programs of study. I am leading several of our student scholarship programs, including the Scholarship for Service. We have the Department of Defense Cyber Service Academy scholarships available for students, as well as the Viceroy Award, also through the Department of Defense, that looks at cyber security and electromagnetic spectrum research. Teach mostly courses in networking, cybersecurity. My degrees are in electrical engineering, so I like stuff with hardware, so I kind of gravitate towards some of the hardware topics as well. And so that's why I enjoy doing some security vulnerability research on small embedded systems, and particularly with medical devices. So the School of Computer and Cyber Sciences started in 2017. It grew out of the Hull College of Business. At the time, we had 2 degrees. We had an information technology degree and a computer science degree. In 2018, Dean Alexander Schwarzman joined us, and we've been experiencing significant growth since then. We've gone from 2 majors to 7 undergraduate majors. We've added some graduate programs, and we've had a PhD program since 2021. We have increased our research. Prior to Dean Schwartzman joining us, we focused mostly on teaching and didn't really worry about research. Now with the PhD program, our research has increased greatly. We've have designations through the Centers of Academic Excellence in both cyber defense and cyber operations, and our computer science program has been ABET accredited for several years. These are the list of academic programs that we have. Our Bachelor of Science in Cyber Operations is the one that's designated as the program of study for cyber operations, and our bachelor's degree in cybersecurity is the degree designated for cyber defense. We've recently added the Bachelor of Science in Biomedical Systems Engineering that looks at the healthcare system and how to better secure the healthcare system. Augusta University is affiliated with or has the Medical College of Georgia, and so we have a large number of faculty and students who are interested in the healthcare system, and that's one of the reasons that I conduct research on medical devices. Part of the investigating security goes beyond just looking at how we secure information and files and computers. You may be familiar with the 16 sectors that are the critical infrastructure sectors. Several of these deal with physical effects, so computer systems that cause effects in the physical world. Several of these sectors are very relevant to Augusta and the surrounding areas. Again, Augusta University being part of the Medical College of Georgia and having all of the rural hospitals. I think I heard a number of 91 rural hospitals. So how do we better secure those hospitals and their technology because they aren't going to have dedicated cybersecurity staff to help protect them. All right, so why medical devices? So medical devices we could consider to be like any of the other IoT devices that are out there. A lot of times there's network connections on devices now. They either can plug into Ethernet cables, they can connect to Wi-Fi, they can connect to our phones using Bluetooth. It used to be that the security of the devices was based on physical proximity. Okay, so think of like an infusion pump in your hospital room that delivers IV medication to you. Okay, it measures that out and makes sure that you get the correct dosage over time. Used to be that the way you interfaced with that was touching the front panel. Somebody thought it was a great idea to put network cards and allow those things to be able to connect it to Wi-Fi. So now that increases the attack surface on those devices. A researcher several years ago looked and found ways that you could compromise those infusion pumps and change the medical database inside of those so that potentially they could deliver lethal doses of some medications. So we've decided that it was a good idea to connect all of these devices. Now we see that there's other medical devices that we can either implant or wear, take home with us. And those are really the ones that I'm most interested in and the ones that we'll talk about coming up. The ability for doctors to remotely monitor your health through those systems helps to improve patient care. So instead of the only time when the doctor was able to review your medical status was when you went into the doctor's office, now your medical device can communicate your status to the doctor 24/7. Okay? Again, that's great for improving patient outcomes. Okay? However, most of these devices have not been designed with any kind of security in mind. Just like many IoT devices, if security is considered, it's usually considered after that item is deployed as an afterthought. The FDA is getting better about providing guidance when you are pre-market, when you're getting ready to develop these items to get FDA approval. And then they also have guidance for post-market. So if there is a vulnerability that's found or there's something that needs to be done to update your device, they have to have a way to communicate that with you so that you can bring your device in and have it patched, essentially. One of the things that we need to ensure with security is that it's usable security. Okay? If there's devices in the operating room, for example, you don't want those to require a thumbprint to unlock. Okay? You don't want it to require facial recognition, okay? Because the doctors, physicians in that medical environment will be masked and gloved. So it doesn't make sense to have to interact with the device to unlock it, even though that may make it more secure. With the medical devices, sometimes security risk must be accepted in order to provide better patient outcomes. That the end result is not to make that device secure, that the purpose of that device is to improve patient outcomes. One of the things that we're looking at is, especially for those devices that go home with patients, could they be used as a way to get into the hospital network to either breach data or launch ransomware or whatever other kind of attack that you might have heard of or can think of. Okay, we've heard of some hospitals having ransomware attacks, and they basically have to stop seeing patients because either they can't access the medical records or they can't access the devices. So we don't want to add ways for attackers to prevent hospitals from doing their job. As we think about medical devices, again, the ones that I think are more interesting to study are those that are implantable or wearable that go home with patients. Okay, so you've probably heard of many of these kinds of devices, but there's probably some that you haven't heard of. We've all probably heard of pacemakers or hearing aids or blood glucose monitors, insulin pumps. Again, those are going to start off in that more secure hospital environment and then go home with the patient. And there they're going to connect to their home network. They're going to potentially connect to the free Wi-Fi at McDonald's in the airport. And then is there a way for attackers to put something extra on those devices while they're connected to those networks that the patient then brings back into the hospital when they go in for their checkups? So that's one of the things that we're interested in trying to discover. One of the, I think, more interesting of these devices is the medication compliance. This is where they put sensors inside your medicine so that when you take the medicine, it reacts with your stomach acids. They have a power cell inside of these sensors that is activated by your stomach acid, and then that communicates to your phone or some other sensor that you're wearing on your body. That seems pretty interesting to me, that doctors from their office can tell when you're taking your medicine, if you've taken your medicine. So, when we start talking about how do we do security assessments on these kinds of devices, one of the things that we look at is trying to figure out how they work, okay, or doing some reverse engineering on them. When we talk about reverse engineering, there's quite a wide spectrum on steps you can take to understand how the device works. On the far left side, we see what amounts to open source intelligence. So looking on the internet, looking for documents or manuals that describe how the device works. There's the FCC database. If that device has any form of wireless communication, it's going to be listed in the FCC database. To get approval for those items to communicate, the manufacturer has to submit all of the diagrams and how the device works. So that's a great place to look to find information out about those devices. You can determine what frequency it's going to operate on, what microcontrollers it may have on it, circuit diagrams that will show you where the items on the device are. Kind of the next step down would be, if you're able to get your hands on one of these devices, is to take it apart. Okay? You can take it out of the case and you can use some relatively simple tools, a multimeter, for instance, an oscilloscope. They have some other logic analyzers that you could connect to the device to see how it communicates on the device and if there's any potential vulnerabilities that may result from you being able to get physical access to the device. We've taken apart several different devices that run a Linux operating system called BusyBox. And most of the time, when you connect to that device, either through one of these probes, or we had another device that had a USB connection on it with the Wi-Fi dongle. When we unplugged the Wi-Fi dongle and plugged the keyboard into it, the device booted up and gave us the little hashtag prompt. That means you just logged on to that device as root. Okay? No password, no credentials, nothing. You just connect to it and it gives you a root prompt. Okay? Most people probably aren't going to take their devices apart and do stuff like that, but that is something that's a vulnerability. Okay? A lot of times, looking back at the documentation, if there are any usernames and passwords, just like your home routers, there's a default password that's published in the documentation. So even if you don't take it apart, you can usually look in the documentation if there is any username and password and gain access to the device that way. When you do take it apart, you may find other devices that are visible now on the board. There may be memory chips on there. There may be microcontrollers that you can interact with. You can take the parts off of the board. You can desolder those and put them in devices that will read the memory. So sometimes they have stored cryptographic keys that are on these chips. And you can, again, take the device off, put it in a chip reader, and get access to those cryptographic keys. Sometimes they'll just store passwords if they are going into like a firmware update or some other kind of patching system. They may have stored credentials on the system to allow them access online to those pieces of software. If you are able to get the firmware either through extraction off the chip, or sometimes you can download it off the website, that will lead to another level of understanding for how the device works. The firmware will show all of the devices, how they communicate, what commands are available. If you can extract the firmware, that probably also means that you could rewrite the firmware. So if you can rewrite the firmware, you can change the way that the device operates. One of the early devices that we took apart was a Wi-Fi extender. This is a device that you would have connect to your Wi-Fi access point and provide an extended signal, maybe from downstairs to upstairs. But this is one of those devices that we just connected to the serial ports on board, booted up to root for us. We could have rewritten the operating system and caused it to do other behaviors. You may be familiar with the device called a Wi-Fi pineapple that sometimes attackers use to pose as a known access point. Advertise it as free Wi-Fi or whatever, and then all of your connections go through that access point. Your encryption that you think you are using is through that access point and may be exposed plain text when you try to do the connection through that rogue access point. So those are all things that could happen at the firmware level. We talk about going a little bit further down. We have partnered with Savannah River National Lab, who has access to some pretty neat X-ray devices. So we're able to send the devices that we're inspecting through the X-ray. And what that will do is it takes multiple slices, if you will, of the device so that it winds up that you have a 3D X-ray image of the device that you can look at different layers, you can spin it around, look at it from different aspects. That really helps you understand what's going on at the microscopic level. All right. So why would anybody want to do this kind of reverse engineering? Some of it may be that it's an old system that you have and the people who designed it don't work for you anymore and nobody knows where the plans are for it. Or nobody knows where the code is that you may be able to recover off of an existing device. Sometimes people make fakes of your devices. Okay, think if you're Intel or some other large chip maker, you probably aren't making those chips locally. You're sending them off to someone else to have them fabricated. That someone else may make their own version of your chip and resell it under their label. Okay, making a counterfeit version. So you may want to buy some samples of a competitor's chip and do some reverse engineering to see if their plan looks identical to your plan. And that may cause some IP infringement processes to take place. Sometimes you just want to do quality control. Hey, we're going to take every 1,000th widget off the assembly line and make sure it's really doing what we want it to do. Sometimes you just want to gain more knowledge about the system, or sometimes you're an attacker that may be interested on how to find vulnerabilities and compromise that system. So what we're doing is we're trying to go through with some of our students and teach them these processes for doing some of the reverse engineering and security assessments on these devices. Again, one of the first ones we did was on that Wi-Fi repeater. 2 or 3, I guess we had 3 undergraduate students who worked on that project, presented it at B-Sides a few years ago. It was published in an IEEE conference. So it was a lot of fun working with the students and kind of starting to develop coursework and some processes for how we could do this type of investigations with undergraduate students. Also had some students who were more interested in the privacy and policy side. So you're likely familiar with the right to forget, the GDRP that they have over in Europe, where you can say, hey, forget about all of my past browsing histories and things like that. Well, what about your medical records? Is it really important that your medical records from when you were 5 years old keep dragging around with you? Maybe there's some way that we don't need to make all of that available potentially to attackers that may want to steal your medical data to impersonate you or for whatever nefarious reasons they may have. So that was some of the privacy and policy work students did. Recently, we've been more interested in the network communication of the devices. One of the projects we looked at some of the in-room patient monitors. So these are the devices that would capture your vital signs, your temperature, blood pressure, your pulse ox, and all that kind of medical stuff. And those devices, normally you've got one of those in every room on a floor, and they send all of their information to a central monitoring station. Again, one of the benefits of the network connectivity is to produce patient outcomes. So now if there is some alert that's going on in a room, you don't have to have a nurse come by every 15 minutes to check. Now they've got that central monitoring station that can send alerts to that central station. So we were looking at the security of the communication from the patient device in each room to the central monitoring station, and then further from that central monitoring station to electronic health records. What we found out when we discovered the model of the device we were looking at is all of that the vital sign information was transmitted in plain text. Okay, which again, this device was meant originally to be interfaced with by touching it. And now, once they set it up, transmits all its information, why would you have thought to try to encrypt that data? Okay, so it's coming across plain text. So then that leads to, well, what if we try to do a man-in-the-middle attack? Can we make it look like a patient with normal vital signs has zero pulse to cause all the nurses to run down to that end of the hallway? Okay. Or maybe the worst case, is it possible that you could make someone look like they have a normal pulse when they have no pulse at all? Okay. And then there would be no alert. Okay. So we found out that you could do these types of man-in-the-middle attacks with these patient monitoring systems. We then started looking at, question? So what we found looking at some of the designs we did open up is that it looked like they had the design that they'd been using for years and years, that they decided they wanted to make network enabled. So there was just a communication board that was added in there that had an Ethernet port, and many times they had soldered on a USB connection, and you know the little Wi-Fi USB dongles, taken that out of the case and pushed it into the soldered on USB connection. So again, it looked like it was an afterthought for how they had added network capability to these devices. So then we started looking more at the devices that go home with patients or that are used outside of a hospital environment. One of the devices that we looked at are some portable ultrasound devices. So these are, if you're familiar with the ultrasound, normally you see them on a big cart, and there's the wand that they use to explore your body, and then they've got the big screen. Well, they have these little handheld ultrasound devices now that are about the size of your cell phone, maybe a little bit fatter than that. No screen, but then they connect to your phone or to a tablet to provide the screen. So Bluetooth connection and all that image traffic is sent from the device to the screen. There was an incident, several incidents, where they had some of these devices that they were using in a military environment, and they were able to see the radio frequency signature of these devices from far away. Whether those devices were reaching out to the home website to make sure that they had the right license, whether they were using GPS to track their location, there were several different ways that this was happening. Another device that we're looking at now are hearing aids. So you think hearing aids should be pretty safe and simple, but maybe think of it in terms of military environment where they may have hearing aids that are going to go into a secure environment. Okay, hearing aids in a skiff. Is that a problem? Not sure. Could be. A lot of the hearing aids now will connect by Bluetooth to your phone. Okay? Normally when you go in a skiff, you're going to leave your phone outside. Maybe there's not a big danger there, but is it possible that these devices could record some of the sounds that they're hearing, and then later on an attacker could retrieve those recordings? When you're connected to your phone, that's probably highly likely that you could do something like that. So we're investigating that, as well as the time when they are no longer connected to your phone. Is there some recording capability in the devices? And that's where being able to x-ray them and look at what's inside helps us determine if there's capability for something like that to happen. Outside of the military environment, think of corporate America. Okay? Corporate America likely doesn't have a phones outside the room policy. Maybe they do. But in that case, if you're talking about marketing strategies or new product development, you're likely going to have the hearing aid there with the phone in those meetings. So that's what we're investigating now is it possible to do some of that? And then we're also doing some hardware security assessments on some other devices that are used at border control points to look for sensitive items, okay, or sensitive materials. And is there a way to be able to compromise the way that those work? That was one of the devices that we were able to pop the Wi-Fi dongle out of the handle and connect the keyboard, and we got root on. So those devices are used in a sensitive area. So this is some information about the projects. Those are both funded through Savannah River National Lab. Looking at the devices, what we would like to be able to do is have some process that we follow regardless of the device that we have to assess, that we go through a standard process. Some of you may be familiar with penetration testing, where sometimes it's just the personality of the penetration tester as to what you find. So we'd like to try to come up with some way to have more of a standard set of assessment tools that are used so that it's not personality dependent on if you're going to find the vulnerabilities. Part of that.
Is there anything that suggests that AI would be able to be one of those tools to look for anomalies and authenticate?
So AI is probably going to play a role in that, yes. AI is still relatively new in figuring out how to apply it toward these types of situations, but we have researchers who are looking at different aspects of applying artificial intelligence to different tasks. So when we're looking at this process, we would like to consider, well, let's go from the beginning. How do we look at some of the open source intelligence? What methods do we use to search for documents that are going to give us information about these devices? What are the different pieces of hardware that may be used on these devices? Can we get access to the firmware? What about all the different types of communication that the device has? So could be wired, could be wireless, could be several types of wireless. Are those all attack vectors that could be used? Many of these devices now connect to our phones and have a mobile app. Mobile apps are another one of those, similar to Internet of Things devices, that sometimes don't have a lot of security built into them. So we can use some more standard binary reverse engineering tools on mobile applications to see if there's vulnerabilities on mobile applications that could compromise this medical device system. So this goes to some of the categories that we're looking at for developing this repeatable process. In our lab, we have a test environment that's set up that allows us to enable the use of the hospital environment where the device would start out. Okay. So there we have maybe electronic health record server. We have some other devices that would be used to configure or monitor the medical devices. We have a network that replicates the home environment and maybe some of the other devices that may be in a home environment. So think all of your Alexa or Google Home, or how many of you have a Wi-Fi enabled toaster? Okay. Or a dishwasher or refrigerator. Again, just because you can doesn't mean you should. Some of these devices don't need to be connected to the internet, but they are, and they likely have their own set of vulnerabilities. So could those provide access to those medical devices? And then we also have a third-party network. So here, think of clinics that may be outside of the hospital, or your insurance company. Would your insurance company like to have access to all of your Fitbit data? Maybe, because that way, if they see something weird, they can charge you higher premiums, right? Yeah. Is that something you've probably agreed to in your end user agreement that you didn't read? Probably so. You've probably agreed to give all of your data to whoever wants to pay for it. So that's what that third party network represents, is some of those other organizations that may have access to your data or could figure out a way to get access to the data. We also, since we're dealing with looking at some of the radio frequency data, we have a small Faraday box that we can put the device under test inside of. And then we have different tools like a hack RF, which is a broad range radio receiver transmitter. So we can see what frequencies the device is broadcasting on. And we can also try to send data to the device to see how it may react. Since many of these devices have Bluetooth now, we do have some Bluetooth dongles. There's an Ubertooth that we had from several years ago. They don't make those anymore, but they have other types of Bluetooth dongles now that you can use to both send and receive and scan across Bluetooth communications. Are there any questions? Yes.
I'm just curious, how, if there's some sort of precedent for partnering with the smaller counties, hospitals, and providing medical technology?
Yes, so one of the things that we're looking at the Georgia Cyber Innovation and Training Center is through a grant going out and doing security assessments at small companies. They started off looking at small manufacturing companies, and are now broadening out to look at rural hospital as well as some of the independent school districts. So your K-12 school districts. Again, most of the rural hospitals and school districts aren't going to have a large IT or cybersecurity staff that they have looking at that information and may not even know where to start. So that's where these student-led teams go out and conduct more what you would think of as a information technology assessment on those small companies, rural hospitals, to help them harden their sites.
That comes up to the next question, because most of the time they won't have the funds to get them up to that scale. Are you thinking ahead to say, if we have a grant or some way to help them achieve the goals you laid out?
So my understanding is the next phase of that project is to provide some type of security operations center type monitoring for those disadvantaged companies and networks. So while they may not be able to go out and buy lots of equipment to be able to secure themselves, maybe all they can afford is some firewall technology at their edge. But really, and we talk about this in some of the courses that I teach, is it really possible to secure your network? Probably not. Okay.
You're doing defense in depth.
It, right. Even if you're doing defense in depth, the attacker, if they're determined and well funded, will find a way to get into your network. It may be a situation where when the bear's chasing you in the woods, you just don't want to be the slowest person. Maybe if you're hardened a little bit, they'll move on and look for someone else. But if they're determined to get in, they're likely going to get in. So the next step would be, well, then let's figure out as soon as they get in that they're in. So the detect part is maybe even more important than the protect part. If we know that they're going to get in, I really want to know as close to when they get in as possible that they're in, and then work on pushing them out and going through recovery and remediation. Question?
Yes, sir. So has there been any talk leading to like maybe litigation or some type of regulation regarding like ERP, right? So all hospital attacks I've observed over the past 5 to 10 years, almost all of them did not have a disaster recovery plan, or they didn't even have what now is colloquially known as cyber insurance. And so like I know there are certain entities within the government sphere, maybe even medical sphere, like hey, bare minimum, you're gonna need to have like a disaster recovery plan, you're gonna need to have some sort of air insurance. Like you mentioned before, we want to keep the customers, keep them coming into the hospital so we see the patients, whatever. Proper implemented ERP is like, okay, like it goes back to what you were saying of, hey, we detected a threat, let's go ahead and segregate that part of the network, let's recover as much as we can, and then keep going business as usual. And then we, what he was talking about, have the SOC analysts come in and do that recovery process.
So I think some of your larger hospital systems are likely reading the news and seeing what's going on and say, we don't want that to happen to us. So maybe they are moving in that direction. It's the smaller hospitals that have no staff that may not even know that that's something they need to do. So that is a big challenge. But I'm not aware of any legal regulations at this time. Is there someone else that may be aware of?
Cyber insurance always jumped on us because I had to fill it out for the years that down on me. When I first started filling out the paperwork, it was 4 pages. The last one I filled out a year ago was 30 something. So it's at the point if you want to get cyber insurance, you gotta have the ERP. And there's a billion other things I had to enter on there and provide. Because your external legal office may want all that, but they sit down with the negotiating table with the cyber insurance company, and they're gonna be asking those questions yes or no. They're the one that did all that. That was got so long and so difficult that we're starting to see companies, do something better because at this point, we're gonna get $1 million coverage and our deductible is $1 million. So what's the point?
And I've seen another thing where it's almost to absurdity, where they'll actually, they know that the ransom is usually asking Bitcoin, so they have Bitcoin miners mining to help them pay, because they know that the threat is real. And I think that that's counterintuitive, obviously, but they're just going through great lengths to try to mitigate the risk as they can.
And it is one of those risk analysis trade-offs that you have. I mean, investing in security will not contribute directly to your bottom line. Okay, just because you have security, it's hard to prove that you've actually prevented something. It may just be accidental that no one else, that no one attacked you, yet you've spent 10% of your assets on security. So it is a trade-off, and maybe you just are willing to assume some risk and say, well, when it happens, we'll focus more on how do we recover than anything else. Tiffany?
I would point out that some of the smaller institutions, like the restaurant accounting, like you said, they can't buy a lot of products or do a lot of cyber, or they might even have a cybersecurity staff or even a person. So for them, if they did have some service like that that come in and just said, okay, this is where all your holes are in the house before you buy it, and you live in it, or these are the groups you live in it, at least they are aware and can budget and plan for those things, and they do have a breach of health information, and NIH comes down and goes, we're gonna shut you down, we're gonna fine you, and this is gonna be how it's gonna roll, you're out of business. Versus, we see you got what you could for it as an assessment, you've made a risk register, you've made a plan to approach these things, you just don't have the revenue, you didn't budget planning for this, we're gonna let you stay in business, but we wanna keep you in the budget. So that's the difference when it comes to these small municipalities, small hospitals. It gives them a stamp of power if something does happen to kind of come to the table with this national security help and say, we're trying to do what we can, we can't get there that fast.
Gentleman here?
Yeah, I have a question about deception technique. You know, a lot of times, you know, this is just how the medical systems work, and, you know, there's nothing you can do about it. But what you could do is overlay some sort of deception environment that mimics those devices so that you can catch adversaries as they come in. You guys kind of,
You saying like use a honeypot or something like that?
you know, there's a lot more modern ways of doing it, but yeah, everyone knows.
We've not looked into that part. We're not looking into that right now. We're concentrating mostly on the devices and how they interact, not trying to emulate an entire healthcare system at this point. Dean Schwartzen?
Yeah, I was going to answer the question. I did have some discussions with legislators as to whether or not they can legislate cybersecurity. And I think the common wisdom is that at this point it's pretty much impossible because, you know, a small business may be put out of business because they don't have the resources to do that. And also, if you have a big business that spends millions on security, would you punish them if they were broken by an adversary? I mean, that doesn't make any sense. Now, another thing to comment on is that if we take the financial industry, in the U.S., the financial industry is losing about 1.4% of electronically derived revenue to cyber crime. But the banks are viewing this as a cost of doing business. So they invest in security up to a certain level, millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars. And then they're saying, well, you know, our revenue, $100, I give $2 to the thieves, my expense is 90, I have $8 of profit, I'm good, right? And, you know, it's just common business. But I have actually questions. The question is, in one of your slides, you showed different ways of trying to understand what the device is doing, right? OSINT, one of them trying to reverse engineer, look at the chips using microscopy, right? Firmware. Why not ask the vendor for the specs?
So sometimes the vendor is not going to want to give up the specifications because they consider that their intellectual property. Part of this research is when you discover vulnerabilities, you have to consider what are you going to do with that information. As researchers, we're going to act in an ethical way and we're going to do responsible disclosure. We will normally contact the vendor and explain what we found. They may already know about it, may not care to fix it. Again, it just depends kind of what their profit motives are or where it is in the life cycle of development. But companies normally, unless they're asking for someone to do one of these assessments, aren't usually in favor of handing over all of the information.
So just along that line, USPTO would have some information on these devices that have patent. So there's something not to look there too.
If the patent office could be another one of those open source intelligence sources. Yes.
And there's another reason. Sometimes they know that there is a problem and they want to hide it, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's about profitability.
Yes.
So, I know the focuses on the devices themselves, and those are one of the big group discussions, sandboxing and protecting the outputs of medical devices as it reaches the optimal network. That's something that we have.
So the question was related to, okay, so you find these vulnerabilities, now what? How do you protect the system? We haven't really investigated that part of it yet. That would likely be another research agenda that we could pick up. If we discover these, how do we then protect them? There are in industry, they have tried to develop some of these types of front end devices. So you could almost think of it like a medical device firewall or a medical device intrusion detection system. And one of the companies that provided some devices to us had one of these devices. We did a little bit of evaluation on it. I don't remember how well it really did what it advertised to do, but that could be something, again, somebody asked earlier about AI, that could be something where AI could get involved with looking for traffic patterns and what does normal behavior look like and when can you spot abnormal behavior that may cause the human then to go and investigate further. Right. Are you talking about sandboxing the device or are you talking about internal to the device, how it treats data? Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So that may be possible in like a hospital network, but when we start sending these devices home with patients, that becomes maybe a little bit more challenging because then we're having to ask them, hey, when you want to use this thing, carry around this other box with you that provides that sandbox. So, but that's a good point.
As far as FDA and FCC, have you seen anything, as far as them trying to develop a better policy for policing the kinds of, possible data?
So FDA has done a great job, my opinion, in advancing their guidelines for device authorization or device registration. So they've got the pre-market guidance now that when it started off more than 10 years ago was very rudimentary. Recently, in the past 3 years, I think they released another update to that goes into a lot more details. So it holds the device manufacturers to a higher standard for trying to design security into their products. And then they've also recently gone through update cycles in their post-market guidance that gives more information about how they should respond if a product that's already gone out has some kind of vulnerability, that they can inform patients and let the patients make their own decision. Sometimes you think, if it's an implantable device, if I've got a pacemaker and there's a vulnerability discovered that says, only on the third Tuesday of every month with the full moon, if somebody is standing 2 inches away from you with, this device, they'll be able to stop your pacemaker. Okay, that's a real vulnerability, but is it more of a risk that series of conditions would happen, or is it more likely that when I'm having that pacemaker taken out and a new one put in, that I'll get some type of infection and die from the surgery? And so there's trade-offs. Again, the whole purpose of those devices is to increase health outcomes for the patient. So just like we talked about with companies, maybe doing that analysis on, do I spend an extra $1 million on security, or do I accept the risk that the patients are likely going through some other thought process for their devices? Now, if it's, hearing aids or a blood glucose monitor or something external to you, then it's likely a much easier decision. Yeah, I'll connect it to the internet, download the patch, or bring it to the device manufacturer and have them give me the new model or something like that. But if it's implantable, then it's different set of risks. Any other questions? I think we're about out of time. Thank you all for your questions. Thank you for your time. Thank you for coming out and listening. I hope you enjoy the rest of TechNet.